Mary Jo thought she had the perfect life.
I had a beautiful son and a beautiful daughter and this funny, exciting husband.
But her decision to marry a man named Joey Buttafuoco would have disastrous consequences.
It turned into a media circus because it was such a bizarre story.
She meant to kill me. I wasn't there to get hurt. I was there to die.
We've all heard the story, but never like this. For in matters of love and marriage, things aren't always what they seem. Growing up in a strict Irish Catholic family isn't always easy, and a couple of rules can apply. Never air your dirty laundry, and always keep up appearances.
I never aspired to be anything more than a mom. So it was ingrained in me from an early age to be a caregiver. I felt that was my destiny.
Back in 1971, destiny came calling for Mary Jo Connery when she met fellow high school student Joey Buttafuoco.
My dad was always kind of the small, little, grunty kind of guy. And then one summer, he got buffed out, and my mom just got gaga-eyed over him. And then they started dating.
What made us a good couple was that I was the steady end, and he was the clown. Every time he would go a little crazy, I was there to rein him back in.
After 5 years of dating, Mary Jo was anxious to become a Mrs.
I wanted to get married, and it was more because I felt the pressure from my parents that if you're gonna have sex, you've gotta be married.
On September 4th, 1977, Mary Jo did what all good Catholic girls do. She made it official with Joey in a church wedding.
My wedding day was a great day. I felt that I was marrying the right man.
Mary Jo and Joey were very loving to each other. Joey was very dedicated to her, and she used to always have the expression, my Joey.
The couple settled in the quaint community of Baldwin, New York, where Joey was working at the family auto body shop. Pretty soon, they were living the good life.
We did things, we were young, you go on our motorcycle and boating. We had a great time together.
But it wasn't always easy. 15 years and 2 children later, Mary Jo and Joey had weathered some serious storms. But Mary Jo was confident that the rocky times were behind them.
Everything got good. It was everything I had worked for. And I thought, I did it. We made it. We've gotten through this.
But on May 19th, 1992, Mary Jo found out just how wrong she was. The day started normally enough. The weather was lovely, so Mary Jo decided to do some work on her back porch.
I started painting, and the doorbell rang. And I could see a girl there.
The girl had a message for Mary Jo.
Your husband is having an affair with my little sister.
She told me that Joey was having an affair with her little sister. It was just unbelievable.
But that wasn't all. What came next would shock Mary Jo and an entire nation.
Were you in love with her husband?
It was like you pulled open the rock and maggots came out.
It was hell on earth. There were times when I wished I hadn't woke up.
In 1979, 13 years before a girl appeared on her doorstep, Mary Jo Buttafuoco was having the time of her life with her husband, Joey.
When we first got married, it was great. We had a lot of friends. Disco just started, and so we'd go clubbing.
But before long, Joey and Mary Jo took their fun to a whole new level.
in the late 70s, cocaine got introduced into our lives. It was this great new drug, and you don't have a hangover. I mean, we bought into the hype.
But when Mary Jo became pregnant with their first child, she put the partying aside. Unfortunately, Joey carried on, and soon his behavior became unpredictable and erratic.
Everything would be wonderful, and then he'd go on a binge, and then come home with his tail between his legs, and promise it was never going to happen again.
A few years later, the Buttafuocos welcomed another child into the family. Mary Jo hoped the new addition would calm Joey down. But as time went on, things only got worse.
And he really, really started going off the deep end. And I'd give him the ultimatum: the marriage is going to end unless you, stop this.
Each time, Joey promised to stop. And each time, Mary Jo chose to believe him.
I didn't want anybody to know that my life wasn't perfect. I had this funny, exciting husband, but had this deep, dark secret of a man who was a raging cokehead and would disappear for days on end.
When things looked pretty bleak, and no matter what Joey did, she always stood behind him.
And I would always make excuses. He was sick, he had to go out of town on business. I mean, it was pathetic how much I kept this in.
For Mary Jo, the biggest priority was keeping the truth about their father away from the kids.
My dad was, in my eyes as a kid, my hero. I was totally oblivious that my father had a drug problem.
As a distraction from Joey's self-destructive behavior, Mary Jo decided to search for a new home.
I thought in my infinite wisdom that if we moved out of the neighborhood we lived in and we went back to where we grew up, maybe that would help. So I went looking for a house in Massapequa.
In August of 1986, the Buttafuocos moved 10 miles east to Massapequa, and for a while, all seemed well.
It was an amazing house on the water, overlooked the bay. No one locked their doors. It was safe, and it was a perfect place to be raised.
To outsiders, the Buttafuocos had the perfect life. But the reality was a far different story.
When we moved into the house in Massapequa, things were horrible because Joe was still addicted at this point.
By October of 1988, Mary Jo could no longer hide Joey's secret.
I told his father and his mother, if we don't put him in rehab and get him off these drugs, he's going to die.
Finally, Joey agreed to enter rehab. While he was there, Mary Jo tried to keep up appearances and shield her children from the truth.
They actually told me that he was in Disneyland, and he would call and check in. And I remember being angry, like, how come I can't go to Disneyland?
30 days later, Joey was home. Newly sober, he quickly became the most popular guy on the block.
When Joey beat the coke, he did change his life and turn his life around.
Joey was a changed man. By the summer of 1992, life for the Buttafuocos was more normal than it had been for a long time, and Mary Jo relished it.
He got sober, and life became what I always wanted it to be. He was wonderful to me, he was great with the kids, and I was proud of him.
But little did she know that her husband had traded one addiction for another, one that would have devastating consequences for Mary Jo.
Boom. Next thing you know, my mom's on the floor.
They told my family, it doesn't look good.
By the summer of 1992, life for the Buttafuoco family seemed better than ever. And on one sunny morning in May, Mary Jo had big plans for the day.
I was going to paint this bench that in the back that I'd been wanting to do all winter. So I got the kids off to school.
It was the first day I rode my bike to school.
I got the paint and all the equipment and went out back, and now it's like 11:30 in the morning.
Mary Jo was in the middle of her painting project when she was interrupted by the doorbell.
And I looked through, and I could see a girl there, a teenager. And I said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Are you Mrs. Buttafuoco?"
The girl claimed her name was Anne Marie, and she was armed with some shocking news.
She told me that Joey was having an affair with her little sister. And I said, "How old are you?" And she said, "I'm 19.
But Mary Jo wasn't buying it. So Anne Marie said she had proof.
She explained to me that Joe left this T-shirt. She produced this T-shirt. And I said, "Look, Anne Marie," I said, "I'll go in the house, I'll call Joe, and I'll tell him you came by."
And with that, Mary Jo turned around to go back into the house.
She pulled out that gun in the second that it took me to turn, and in that second, it came out, I turned my head, and she pulled the trigger. And that's where it landed, in the side of my head.
Next thing you know, my mom was on the floor.
Anne Marie ran off, leaving Mary Jo lying in a pool of blood on her front porch. Luckily, a neighbor spotted her soon after and called 911.
Tragedy struck in Massapequa today for Long Island housewife Mary Jo Buttafuoco.
Police tell us she was shot at point-blank range on her own front porch.
Paramedics rushed Mary Jo to the hospital, her life hanging in the balance.
When Mary Jo Buttafuoco was shot, everyone thought she was going to die. The hospital listed her in critical condition.
Doctors were not able to remove the bullet lodged in Mary Jo's skull because it was too close to her spine.
They told my family, "It doesn't look good. It's a 50-50 chance."
But Mary Jo was lucky, and 3 days later, she came to.
The bullet hit on the right side and caused paralysis on the right side of my face. My jaw's broken, I can't hear, I can't stand up straight, I'm dizzy, I've lost most of my blood.
I just remember thinking, thank God my mom's alive. Not many people get second chances like that.
Mary Jo awoke to find her beloved husband Joey and several police officers at her side.
They asked me, "Do you know who did this to you?" And I nodded yes, and I had a trach tube in me and I couldn't speak. And they gave me a pad and a piece of paper.
Mary Jo scribbled down everything she could remember, and there was one detail that struck a chord with Joey.
Joe worked at the family business, Complete Auto Body. He would give out T-shirts. And I said to Joe, it was one of the new ones. And that's when he turned to the police and said, "I've only given one of these out," and I gave it to Mr. Fischer's daughter. They said, "Who's Mr. Fischer's daughter?" And he said, "Amy Fischer."
My dad made her out to be this completely delusional, crazy, in love, fatal attraction kind of teenager.
But why would this girl want to kill Mary Jo? From her hospital bed, Mary Jo asked her husband that very question.
He never denied that he didn't know her and thought she was an okay kid and liked the parents. And so when it was, then why did she shoot me? He came up with, well, then I guess she was obsessed with me because she wanted you dead.
Are you in love with her husband?
That night, police arrested Amy Fischer and interrogated her for 12 hours until she confessed to the shooting.
How long did you
17-year-old Amy Fischer is charged with attempted murder.
Amy Fischer seemed to be a troubled teenager who had some huge problems and somehow found some solace in Joey Buttafuoco.
On May 22, 1992, Amy Fischer was charged with the attempted murder of Mary Jo Buttafuoco.
Amy Fischer just completely turned my world upside down. My world, my mom's world, my family's world.
11 days later, Mary Jo was released from the hospital, and her welcome wagon came in the form of the tabloid press.
We called it Amy Jo Buttafuoco story. It was like you pulled open the rock and maggots came out. We became the maggots.
2 months later, in December of 1992, Amy Fischer was officially sentenced.
Although she was initially charged with attempted murder, Amy Fischer plea bargained down to aggravated assault, and she was sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison.
Mr. Buttafuoco's lawyer.
And the big question still lingered. Was Joey having an affair with a teenager?
Nobody believed Joey Buttafuoco. And having intercourse with a 16-year-old when you're 37 is statutory rape.
By the spring of 1993, Amy Fischer was in prison. Mary Jo Buttafuoco was trying to heal from a gunshot to the head, and Joey was still denying that he had sex with a minor.
The reaction of the reporters was, nobody believed Joey Buttafuoco.
The police didn't believe him either. And since Amy Fischer was only 16 when she and Joey allegedly had sex, the DA was ready to pursue statutory rape charges against Joey.
They had documented evidence of a hotel receipt that showed that he, in fact, had been to this hotel, and he had no way to explain why he was there and what he was doing there.
I saw the motel receipt, and it looked like his handwriting.
Joey's reaction? It must have been forged.
He told me he didn't do it, and I believed him because I felt that they were against me. They had let Amy take a plea. I really felt very hurt and angry.
Despite Mary Jo's steadfast belief in her husband's innocence, in November of 1993, Joey was sentenced to 6 months in prison for the statutory rape of Amy Fischer.
I continued to stay in this marriage because I was too sick to go anywhere. I had a bullet in my head. There wasn't a thought of leaving.
Joey served 4 months and was released in March of 1994 for good behavior.
I did what I had to do to end it. I did my time, and I'm going home to my family.
When Joe came home, I thought that life was going on a sort of even keel. I mean, he went to jail, I had been shot. Nothing was ever going to be the same, but I was trying to get some normalcy back into our lives.
But Joey was never very good at normal. Before long, while on a publicity trip to LA, trouble found him.
The phone rang in the middle of the night, and it was our attorney to tell me that Joey had been arrested for soliciting a prostitute in LA. I went ballistic.
Because Joey gets arrested again, and he went back to jail.
That was the beginning of the end. But I didn't say it consciously. It was just, I had resigned myself at this point. This is the hell on earth I have to deal with for the rest of my life.
In the summer of 1996, the Buttafuocos picked up and moved to Los Angeles for a fresh start.
Back in New York, life was just completely unlivable. We became this iconic pop culture phenomenon that was just so recognizable. So we had to move out to California for a new chance.
But despite the move to California, the marriage for Mary Jo and Joey was never the same. Just a few years later, Mary Jo told Joey that it was over.
People ask me, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? What finally made you leave? I was just at a point where all the reasons that I stayed weren't there anymore.
In 2003, 11 years after Joey's lover put a bullet in her head, Mary Jo and Joey Buttafuoco officially divorced.
Well, I guess it was only a matter of time, but I just selfishly, as their child, wanted them to be together forever.
I think Mary Jo, when she finally decided to break away from Joey, made a decision that was very hard for her. I think when she talks about Joey now, it's not my Joey, it's, Joey.
After the divorce, while Mary Jo moved on, Joey was still up to his old tricks. He was arrested for insurance fraud in 2003, and in 2008, a sex tape of him and his current wife was accidentally leaked.
I don't know what Joe does anymore on a daily basis. When it comes to Joe, in my brain, I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
In 2005, Mary Jo underwent facial surgery to repair the damage she sustained in the shooting.
A plastic surgeon from Beverly Hills. He helped me. I mean, what you see now is not half the way I used to look. He did a lot of work on me to try to make my face more symmetrical.
Mary Jo Buttafuoco has moved on and has been happily engaged for the last 8 years to her boyfriend, Stu.
Stu is perfect for my mom because he's normal, and that's all she ever wanted. Someone who doesn't need all the drama, who doesn't need all the attention. He's just normal, cool Stu.
Give it a shot.
It's been a very long road, and one that I never thought I would be on. But I've survived it. I want other people to know that they should listen to their guts and do what they feel is right and not what somebody else thinks is right. And now I do what's right for me. I just know that I'm going in a better direction than where I came from.
Absolutely.